Greetings! Welcome to the devlog for Alpha 2 of Update 97 of Hot Dogs, Horseshoes, and Hand Grenades. We're going to start off as always with a quick sound check. Make sure speakers aren't up too high. Wonderful. So what have we got for you this week? Well, you are looking at it. You might be like, whoa, this looks different. That's right. I decided to take a little bit of a detour this week amongst some system and sort of bug fixing work I was working on to give our friendly 45 range a much needed facelift. It was originally provoked by the fact that I was trying to figure out basically why this scene is as expensive as it is to draw performance-wise, and to see if I could do anything about it, and in the process improve the way things like some of the foliage and lighting looked. The good news is, I got it looking a lot better, actually. The bad news is, it doesn't really run much better than it did before. It's a little faster on the CPU. It's about as expensive on the GPU. I just got it looking better from a lighting and shadow standpoint at each of our performance tiers. But it's something I'm still working on. So anyway, but you'll notice a number of new cool things, like our trees actually sway subtly in the breeze, which has that neat effect of making the shadows kind of twinkle. Just makes it feel, I know it might not look as impactfully different in video, but trust me, in VR, it really is something. Apologies, by the way, if there is some ambient noise in the background of my recording. My next door neighbor is running some sort of large motor. Poor timing as always, Anton. Wonderful. So yeah, in addition to the near field changes, you'll notice that there is now a distant wrap. Obviously, really sparse, just to keep it running fast, but I wanted to give the scene a little bit of a feeling of being larger and having a bit more context. Let's take a couple shots over here. Oh, I haven't done this in ages. Let's hit the near gong. Bammo. They're coming for us up in the trees. Nice. Oh, missed. Oh. And the far gong. Oh, just wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. I'll tell you, it has been a little too long since I've spent time in this scene. Okay, paused my recording for a moment to check and see how much the noise that I'm experiencing came through on this mic, and I swear the index microphone is magic. There is literally like a big concrete saw out front of my apartment sawing up the sidewalk to replace it. So loud I can barely think, and yet somehow it's not really coming through on the mic. So I'm not going to complain about it, but boy howdy. It's something to film this devlog. I almost wish you could hear it, so you could understand the madness I'm experiencing. Let's take another shot. Ah, wonderful. So, the other thing I wanted to talk about in regard to this scene is optimization and settings, because I do get a lot of comments from folks that this is a difficult scene to run perf-wise. It is. So we're going to pull open the options panel here. And one of the things, that it has provoked me is I'm going to add some granular options to this very soon, so that you're going to still have these presets, but there's going to be a custom one that will allow you to dial things in better for yourself based upon which HMD you're using, what resolution you're running at, etc. To understand what's going on with these, though, and why that affects how expensive this scene is, the thing to understand is that in any sort of naturalistic scene like this, there are two things that are very, very expensive in VR to deal with. One of them is called Overdraw, and this is, to give you an example of this, if I'm just looking down at the ground, I'm looking through one layer of ground, whereas if I am looking up through this tree, I'm probably looking through 20 sheets of geometry. And now the GPU is smart enough to not spend all of the effort drawing all of those layers of geometry based on that draw order, but it's actually pretty chaotic in these sorts of contexts as to how much of that time and effort is wasted. And this compounds in something like a forest, where for any given pixel, I'm looking like through this tree, through this tree, through that tree, and through one more tree. So for that reason, in this scene, shadows are going to be so much more costly than in other scenes, because it's not just dealing with the overdraw of me looking from my eye viewpoint, but from the sun casting shadows down through layers and layers of the greenery on these trees. It's also one of the reasons you'll notice I have endeavored to make sure that the shadows of the various trees don't really overlap. That's to prevent huge overdraw spikes in the shadowing pass. Anyway, let's knock this down. So the big differences are, on medium, we still have shadows in the near field. I believe MSAA is either off or it's just at 2x, but you'll notice that the shadow distance cuts off at our sort of middle row of cardboard standees. This is probably where most folks are going to want to try to run this scene. Do note that unless you have a very high-end GPU, you're probably not even going to be able to run at medium at 120 if you're using an index. You'll probably have to run at 90, because 120 is a really hard bar to hit. Low, obviously, turns off the shadowing entirely, which I know, it's disappointing to me too. But this will run incredibly fast. This setting it from medium to low cuts over 50% of the total GPU cost, just stripping out shadows. And it also removes a bunch of CPU costs because it doesn't have to do any of those draw batches. So, but if you've ever wondered why there is that sort of seemingly hard cutoff in performance, it's because to do that is very expensive. And then the big difference between high and ultra in the current settings, beyond the fact that the shadowing resolution goes up, its distance goes up, so you can see that it actually is going all the way past our distant gong there. But the big one is that what's called shadow cascades are enabled. You'll notice in high that our close shadows for our trees are very, very soft. They're very blurry, and that's basically because it is using one shadow map for all distances of the shadows, from where I'm standing all the way out to there. In Ultra, it is using what's called shadowing cascades. This is basically where it's using a shadow map just for the area near to me, and then another one for the distance, and then another one past that, and then another one for the very far distance. And that's what allows it to have this incredibly sharp shadow compared to high. But obviously, this is a whole bunch of extra both CPU and GPU cost, which, if you are running this and want the shadowing clarity, based upon which HMD and GPU you have, you might actually need to go into your Steam VR settings and lower your draw resolution a little bit. And if you're playing around with this, I definitely recommend turning resolution off of auto and actually setting that percentage bar manually in your Steam VR options, just because it will help you actually control what's going on when you are trying to tune H3 to your preferences in terms of performance and visual quality. I've got a 1080 Ti. Most of the time I run at 90. I just leave it on high, these on SSA all off, because it basically never frame skips, in that even when I do stupid things. And I am lazy when it comes to configuring games, even my own, which means I like to set things once and never worry about them ever again. There we go. I really need to fix... I broke something at some point. The Sarge is green. It should not be that green. Anyway. Also, do note that the look of this scene is now more dependent on color correction being enabled, because this has actually been tone mapped and color graded correctly. It might be the first scene in H3 that has gotten that treatment. And so please, even if you're like, I hate bloom, and you turn bloom off, turn off bloom, leave color correction on, please, because it will actually make the scene look like it was lit and colored by an adult. So yeah. No, I haven't thrown one of these in a while. Oh goodness. It's still great. It's still great. Anywho, well, I hope you alpha folks end up enjoying this scene this week while Anton is working on the more boring things, which I will jump out of VR and talk to you about now. Yo, out of VR now. Hopefully this time the audio and video are actually in sync with each other. Turns out, because of the fact that this setup has a mirrorless camera going into a capture card into the computer, it takes something like a third of a second for that all to get processed and fed in as a webcam, whereas the audio has no functional latency at all. And well, I had to switch recording programs just to be able to get something where I could adjust that sort of without having to manually resync every video I recorded. And it's a good thing too, because I switched over. I was still using Bandicam for all of my recordings, because I know some of you are probably like, really? But like 5 years ago when I started doing this, it was the best application for recording a screen region without too much onerous GPU overhead, which was my bigger concern back then, or with early VR stuff, before a whole bunch of optimizations occurred. And yeah, so I just kept using that because I'm, as I said in the devlog, I'm kind of like, I want to set something once and never think about it again, which was dumb in this case, because turns out OBS has gotten real good in the intervening time. And I went to record the gameplay that you just watched there when I was doing tests, and I was like, wait a minute, it's a lot smoother now. It looks way better than my other recordings. And turns out I think Bandicam was just recording things choppily, or something was up, or wasn't even capturing at full frame rate. But yeah. So new setup. Pretty much everything working how I would hope it too. As you can see, we've got another piece of, I promise I'm not turning into a gearhead. I promise. But we got a DBX professional mic thingamabob. That's its technical term. It's got like a compressor and a de-esser and all of that. So hopefully that means that Anton's coming to you live and even higher definition. So, but that's all set. As for the game, I am still working on some stuff related to Taken Hold in preparation for a community tournament that's being done. There are two aspects of it three that I'm still working on. One, I was trying to fix scoring and I broke it real bad. Anyone who's been playing the alpha is like, what's going on? I'm getting like 1.4 million. I don't know why that's happening yet. I still need to figure it out. But there's sort of two core problems that I'm still addressing. One of which is that the secondary sort of interaction station in each supply point is not behaving how I expected it to. There are certain people who are reporting that like on some runs, they will reliably get all of the different types in a given hold. And then in other runs, they're not. So I'm trying to gather debugging data from some testing users and figure out what's going on. These sorts of intermittent bugs where something appears to work when, say, a single person, myself, does 10 runs and everything seems to be fine. But then when I gather data from 10 people, it is not working fine, are really time consuming and difficult to figure out. And then the second thing that I really need to fix, and in the process of fixing, I'm probably going to redesign, is the regenerative encryption. Basically, there's a nasty corner case with it, because the way that encryption works is that it's a sphere and it basically sends out these random search rays to find a place to spawn its little sub piece. And you have to destroy those to be able to blow up that encryption. The problem is that because of not just in my levels, but in say mod levels where people have placed the nodes where encryptions can spawn, a wall or a ceiling could be so close to one that it basically spawns inside the core of the encryption, which makes it impossible to destroy. The other problem is that, how to put it, the way the code is written, it's not actually guaranteed to ever find enough places to place its little piece, and that needs to be fixed as well, because I don't think it'll infinite loop out. I think it would just error out and you'd be unable to kill it. So what I'm thinking of doing is making it way more visually evident when you're supposed to shoot it, and instead of having it be, I'm going to play around with it, but I want it to be way more obvious without explanation how to destroy it, because pretty much all of the other ones can be intuited when you fight. But the regenerative one, there have been a certain percentage of users who are like, I don't understand what I'm supposed to do to kill this thing. It regenerates faster than I can shoot, and there's nothing obvious about it. So I'm probably going to change its behavior. And I've got a couple ideas, and I was about to explain them, but I'm like, you know what? I'm going to just find the one that works, present it to you folks next week, and see how that works as a test. But I think I have an idea on how to make it cleaner, more interesting, and just way more obvious what you're supposed to do. So, but yeah, that is mostly what is going on. You should definitely expect over the coming months or so for me to go back and give a little bit of love to some of the other old scenes. Working on the Friendly 45 range was a sort of spur of the moment thing driven. I had been talking with a fellow developer about the difficulty of trees in VR. And I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna try to find a better looking tree for that scene as well and clean up the lighting and see if that got it to run any better. And 50% victory. What would be really great is for those of you who are, and I will make a post on the Steam forum under feature specific. I'm going to make a pinned thread called Friendly 45 Remaster. what I would really love, for those of you who know how to pull up in Steam VR the advanced frame timing graph, I would really love like essentially a screenshot of what your graph looks like, looking centered down the range and telling me exactly what your settings are and what your system specifications are. On that topic, though, I just remembered there's one other really, really important performance and optimization related thing. And I don't know if this is for all GPUs or all VR games, but it's definitely true on my system running H3, which is that if the game does not have cursor focus, i.e. you've clicked on it and it's the main app running, H3 suffers a pretty significant performance penalty, especially in a really expensive scene. And the performance graph gets very, very choppy. This also appears to happen if there are a significant number of windows underneath it on Windows. So when you are running a really expensive scene in H3, or taking performance information, please make sure that the app both has cursor focus and that there's no other window. Basically close every other window that you aren't using, to ensure that you get an accurate and clean pull and know what your perf situation is. All right. Well, that's about it for this week. Next week, we'll hopefully have a tournament ready Take and Hold alpha. I know a number of you are waiting for that Take and Hold tournament, and I've been taking too long to get this all ready. But I want to make sure it's all set and stabilized before you all start practicing for it. So I'll see you folks all next week. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. Peace.